we're 6 hours behind, so it's just gone 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So whereas some of you may have eaten your dinner, I've just had my lunch. So it's great to see so many people in this learning session. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen, and then we can start the session. Okay, so from beginning. Great. So as it says on the screen down on the bottom right, my name's Nick Fewing. I'm based in the UK. I'm a team building expert and conference speaker. And as Tony mentioned, I was honoured to be one of the speakers at the CIMEX event in Bali in March of 2019. So it's lovely to be invited back to speak with you virtually today. So the session is, as it says on the screen, how to achieve high performance teamwork. And for those of you that haven't met me before at CIMEX last year, I just thought I'd share with you, first of all, some Zoom familiarization. I'm sure that you've all been using Zoom like I have and have got used to it, but just in case any of you haven't, if you could ensure your video is switched off and your microphone is muted at the moment, that would be great. It's interesting, some of the webinars I've been on where we have children crying in the background and dogs barking and all sorts going on. So it'd be good if you could do that. Make sure that you know where the Zoom toolbar is. For most people, if you move your mouse to the top screen, the Zoom menu bar will appear. For those of you that use MacBooks, I believe that if you move your cursor to the bottom of the screen, that's where the Zoom toolbar appears. If you have any questions, please use box and make sure it's set to everyone. I won't answer questions immediately, but what I will do is I will look at them at certain points during the next hour just to pick up those questions. I don't know whether this is applicable to this session because obviously it's hosted by PMI Indonesia chapter, but just in case some of the session may be recorded and whiteboards captured. I want to make it interactive, so I want you to get involved. So I've created some polls for you to answer. They are anonymous. All the polls used are anonymous. Please be respectful of others and the views expressed. The session will last no longer than 1 hour. I will get the relevant learning slides via PMI Indonesia chapter so that you can share them with each other after the session. And finally, enjoy the learning because all the research says if you enjoy it, you will remember it and you will use it. So moving on, for those of you that haven't met me, I'm a behavioral psychologist. I've been a behavioral psychologist for over 20 years. I run a training company based in the UK called Engagement Works. I've worked with lots of global brands over the 20 years, predominantly in the UK, but I've also worked in America, Europe, and the Middle East and the Far East. And when I'm not working with teams, the other thing I do is speak at conferences, and that's where I met Tony and a lot of the delegates at the PMI Indonesia chapter CIMEX in Bali last year. When I'm not working with teams, I like to share my knowledge, my experience. So I do write lots of articles about teamwork, and currently I'm in the process of writing a book. So by the end of the year, I will have published a book all about teamwork and team building. So that's a little bit of background about myself. So what are the objectives that I'm going to cover in the next 1 hour? I'm going to share with you some information about why most teams are just average. Then we're going to look at the importance of knowing who is in your team, the value of knowing how your team is working, how effectively your team is working. And finally, I'm going to give you some hints and tips that you can apply immediately to make your team work more effective. So let's start off with team effectiveness. I don't know about you, but I've worked in some really good teams where everybody's been motivated, everybody's been inspired, and it feels fantastic. You have that warm, positive feeling. You look forward to going to work and to work with your team because the environment is so positive and the culture that you work in is so positive. And importantly, you and your team are achieving success. However, I've done some research on teams and how effective they are, and we're going to start off with this poll. This is based on data and information that I've gathered from teams I've worked with over the last 4 years, and I've categorized teams into high performing, average, and developing. So let's start off with a poll question to start off the event. So here's the poll that's coming up. So just have a look at that. So poll question 1: what percentage of teams do you think achieve high performance? So please use your voting button to vote on this poll. Okay, we've started to get some people putting their answers in. That's great. Okay, another 10 seconds for those people that haven't voted. Okay, half of you have voted. So let's stop the poll there, and let me share the results with you. Okay, so this is what you've said. So in terms of what percentage of teams do you think achieve high performance? The majority have said you think 80% of teams achieve high performance. Wow, that you are very, very positive in Indonesia. Very positive indeed. Let me share the actual results of the survey that I've completed. So of all the teams that I've worked with and managed to gather this data, only 10% achieve performance. 50% their teamwork is average, and frighteningly, 40% of teams are developing. So they are below average in how they work together as a team. So that's quite frightening in terms of the poll results, where the majority of you said 80% of teams achieve high performance. If that is working and happening in Indonesia and in the organizations and teams that you work with, that is absolutely fantastic. And I hope that that continues. However, if we take the results of the poll, I did some research around this, and 3 years ago, I had the opportunity to speak in Beijing, in China, and there were 120 leaders from around the globe, from 35 countries, and I wanted to understand what would help them to make their team work even better. So I asked the question, what would make your team work even better? And they came back with lots of answers, but there were two answers that actually were far greater than all the others. And they said they wanted a better understanding of the individuals in their teams, and they wanted to have a tool to help them measure how effective their teamwork was. And 2 years ago, when I spoke in Singapore, I used this information to share with the audience there the fact that far too often leaders and teams are expected to achieve high levels of team performance, but they're not aware of the tools that will help them to achieve it. And as part of my presentation in Singapore, I asked a couple of questions of the audience. How many of you use behavioral profiling in your teams? Was the first question. And 25% came back saying that they did. And then I asked, how many of you measure how effective your teamwork is? 0% came back. None of the teams in the room measured how effective their teamwork was. They did measure certain things, but it certainly wasn't teamwork. And the reason behind this, I think, links a lot to leadership and how people are taught to lead teams. Recently, I did some research on LinkedIn, and I just asked how many people have received leadership training prior to leading a team. And 70% of people who had gone into leadership positions, they were leading a team, 70% of them did not have any training in leadership before leading their teams. Also, of that 70%, 60% of them did not receive any leadership training afterwards. So we've got this situation where a lot of leaders are technically brilliant at what they do. They are then given a leadership position, but they're not given any training to effectively lead their teams to achieve high performance teamwork. So just some interesting statistics that are around it. And the analogy I make is it's as though there's team leaders that have got their team in the car and they've got to drive them to a particular destination. So that's their objectives, their goals. And if you get into a car, you expect to see these sort of dials. You expect to see data and information to help you to get to your destination. However, what a lot of teams and leaders are faced with is this: no dials, no data, and no information to help them get to where they need to go to. In project teams, we do have key performance indicators. Here's an example on the screen here, and it talks about the different stages of the project, and it's got some valuable information and data. However, this is about performance measures that tend to be financially based. Those results of the key performance indicators are actually driven by how effectively your team are working together. So if your team are not working effectively together, it's likely that you will see poor key performance indicators. So it's your teamwork and the effectiveness of your teamwork that will drive the results of your key performance indicators in your projects. What teams don't seem to have is teamwork indicators. And this is one that I created recently for a team I was working with. So there are two elements to a teamwork indicator. The first thing is you need to understand who is in your team. And then secondly, you need to understand how effectively your team is working. And we're going to explore these two elements in a bit more detail. So let's first have a look at the importance of knowing who is in your team. So who is in your team? Each and every one of us brings two generic skills to our team. The first thing that we bring to our team is our technical skills. So it may be that you have got a degree or an accreditation in project management. It may be that you've got an accreditation in accountancy. It may be that you are an expert in Excel or Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, or another particular piece of software. So these are all what I call technical skills. And the second thing that we bring is our people skills. So our people skills are how we make decisions, our creativity, how we communicate, our behaviors. So we've got people skills and technical skills. Every one of us brings that to our team. And there's been some research in terms of which of these two sets of skills is more important to an organization. It adds more value to their financial success. So I'm going to share a poll again with you just to get your thoughts. So on the left, we have people skills and the financial success generated by them. And then on the right, we've got the financial success generated by technical knowledge. The two percentages add up to 100. So what I want you to do is guess how much of that 100% is generated from people skills. So how much organizations rely on their people skills. So here we go, what percentage? So let's relaunch the polling. Here we go. So it's polling on number 2. So it's poll number 2. What percentage of an organization's financial success is due to people skills? So if you'd like to vote now, is it 20%, 45, 55, 70 or 85? So it's poll question number 2. What percentage of organizations' financial success is people skills? So if you can cast your votes now, that would be great. Okay. It looks as though we may have an issue with the polling. Let me just refresh it. I don't know whether that's any better now. So it's poll question 2. If somebody could try voting. Here we go. Yeah, people are voting now. So it's poll question 2. That's great. Okay, I'm going to, that's great. We've got a reasonable amount of people that have polled. So let's just end the polling now, share the results. So poll question 2, The majority have said that 70% of an organization's financial success is down to people skills. So let's have a look at the actual results of the survey, and it's 85%. So organizations rely significantly on people skills to generate financial success. Technical skills are important. However, it's all about the relationships that we have with people in our team, in our organization, with our customers, with our suppliers, with our stakeholders that really makes the difference. In terms of technical skills, there are a number of places where we can get this information to understand better the technical skills of our team members. We can get the information about their technical skills from people's CVs. Now, we might need to qualify what they've put on their CVs. So, because some people actually maybe overstate the truth a little bit in their CVs. So it's important that we check out what technical skills they've written down are actually correct. And one of the ways that we can do that is by getting them to share their certificates of achievement. So CVs qualified by checking certificates of achievement. Also HR, your internal HR systems. So if somebody's been on a course or they've got an accreditation, we should be able to search the HR records of that individual to find out what they've done. And finally, the last thing we can do is speak to them and just ask them what qualifications that they have. So technical skills, we can get that information from a lot of different places. People skills, you tend to be able to get an understanding of people skills from behavioral profiling. And there are lots of behavioral profiles that you can use that they're out there in the marketplace. Most of the ones that are very, very good to use in team situations usually use color to bring the behavioral psychology to life. So I use one that I shared in Bali last year, which it uses color. It uses 4 colors. Red, yellow, green, blue. And most of these profiles use the psychology of a Swiss psychologist called Carl Jung. And the 2 behavioral preferences that Jung studied and mentioned that are most important when we work in teams are introversion and extroversion, and thinking and feeling. Introversion and extroversion is where we get our energy from. People who are more introverted get their energy from within themselves. People who are more extroverted get their energy off other people. So that's really important to understand in terms of who's in your team. The other 2, thinking and feeling, is how we make decisions. Some people, when they make decisions, are very logical. They use facts, data, information. So they are what we call thinkers. Other people, when they make decisions based on relationships and people. So they are called feelers because it's about relationships for them. Now, we all have all these 4 within us, but we just use them to varying degrees. And for those of you who saw me at the conference in Bali, I shared these 4 top-level behaviors, and I used these colorful cards and also adjectives that describe these different preferences. So at the top level, we have yellow, green, blue, and red. And they represent the 4 different types of people that you will find in your teams. And these adjectives against these 4 colors describe some of the attributes that these people have. So just take a moment to read those adjectives, and just remember which one is your most like you color. Is it the yellow? Is it the sociable, dynamic, demonstrative, enthusiastic, expressive, persuasive? Is it the green? Is it caring? Are you caring and sharing? Are you very encouraging and patient and relaxed? Or is it the blue? Are you cautious? Are you quite precise and deliberate? Do you question things? Are you analytical and formal? Or are you competitive? Are you decisive and determined? Are you very strong-willed and purposeful? Do you drive things forward? So hopefully you will have resonated with one of those colors. We are all four. However, we always have one that is stronger than the others. So let's have a look at maybe some of the strengths that you bring. If you thought that you had a resonance with the red energy, you're what I would call the strategist, who are very results focused, decisive, very assertive. They want to get things done, and they want to get things done at pace. So some great skills that the red energy brings to a team. And in terms of the behavioral psychology, if you have a look, it's in the thinking top half, and it's also on the extroverted side. So people with red energy are extroverted thinkers. Then we have the yellow, which is what I call the communicator. They're very persuasive, they're optimistic, they're very engaging. And I call them the communicators because they are good at verbal communication. They don't like having to write things down as much, but verbally they are very good at talking to other people. And they are called extroverted feelers. Then we have the green, which is what I call the diplomat. They are very supportive, listening, loyal, great team members, and they try to get the team to work together. And again, this is why I call them diplomats, because they like to get everybody's opinion and everybody's agreement. And then last but not least, the introverted thinkers, the blue, I call these the experts. They are objective, they are consistent, and they like to analyze. They like to question things to understand how things work and why we're doing things. So again, some wonderful skills. And it's important that when you're in a team, you understand your skills, but also the skills that your team members bring. And hopefully those skills will be different to yours. And by using behavioral profiling, you can actually understand to a great deal of depth what different people are like. So most behavioral profiling, you have an online behavioral profiling analysis tool, an evaluator where you answer the questions. And that will produce normally a graph of what your preferences are. So here we can see on screen, this person leads with a lot of yellow energy, supported by green. So they're both people-centric colors, the yellow and green. Blue is their next. So they're quite analytical, but they haven't got a lot of red energy. And for those of you who are interested, this is my graph. This is me. This is how I operate. So yellow and green, as I said, very people-centric. So that's why I love training. I love helping and supporting people to be their best. And I have a lot of blue energy as well. So that helps me plan things out and prepare. So having this behavioral profiling, we can understand who lead with thinking, who are extroverts, who are feelers, and who are introverted. And most profiles will have some lovely information about you. They will have some summary statements about who you are, what your wonderful skills and strengths are. They usually have pages that reflect communication. So things to do when you're communicating with me, but also things not to do. And finally, they will look at the wonderful strengths that you have that you bring to the team. So working in a team, this is really, really important information to have. So I just wanted to find out from you another poll here. So this is going to be poll question 3. So let me just clear them again. So poll question 3, quite simply, 2 questions. Do you use behavioral profiling to better understand who is in your team? Okay, I'm going to end the polling here. And I shall share the results. And what you've said is that quite a few of you, 75% of you, use behavioral profiling in your teams, which is, again, if that's happening, that's fantastic, because that is a really high percentage. So well done to you if you're using behavioral profiling in your teams. Certainly in the webinar that I did the other day, which was the majority of people in the United Kingdom, but those two were reversed. That only 25% were using profiling and 75% didn't. So if that's what you're doing in Indonesia, that you are using behavioral profiling, fantastic, well done to you. So let me get back to the webinar. So the great thing if you're using profiling is you can map your team, so you can understand the different color preferences that people have, and who leads with which of these different dominant color energies. So this is a team I was working with recently, and they didn't have a lot of blue energy in the team. So it was important to understand that and how it impacted on how the team worked overall. So please do continue to use profiling in your teams to understand who's in your team. Because what you can do is, if you use behavioral profiling and also we know somebody's technical skills, what I would suggest that you do, if you don't already, is you create a technical skills and people skills matrix. Here's an example on the screen. This was a team I was working with recently. They had profiles and we knew their technical abilities. So it's a simple thing. You can create it on an Excel spreadsheet, but make sure you do that and make sure it's available for other team members to read, because it's so important. You know, this team were able to know that Amira at the top actually had certification in project management, which was brilliant when the team was putting together a project. It was always fantastic as well to know that Iris, the third person down, she was a PowerPoint expert. So the team was able to use her skills and experience to actually create PowerPoint presentations for when they were sharing their project with their customers and their stakeholders. And also we had the people skills. So people in the team could understand who was the creative thinker, which again was Iris, who was good at building customer relationships, which was Caroline at the bottom. So if you haven't got one already, a great tip, I would suggest create this technical people skills matrix. So the last thing I want to share with you in terms of who's in your team is this statement here. There are many eyes in a team. You've probably heard the opposite phrase, there are no eyes in a team. I disagree with that. I think there are many eyes. And here they are. And they're called individuals. And these individuals in your team have got valuable and unique technical and behavioral skills. So never forget that. You bring some wonderful technical and behavioral skills to your team, and you are a unique individual. To make sure that you and your colleagues celebrate your individuality and the wonderful skills that you bring to your team. So that's giving you a bit of an understanding of knowing who's in your team. So let's go on to understanding how effectively your team is working. Now, only 1% of teams actually measure team effectiveness. As I mentioned, most teams have key performance indicators, project milestones, project indicators. However, they are a result of how effectively your team are working together. And over the years, I've collated questions in terms of how teams are working. And I've created a model called Team Dynamics. And Team Dynamics is a tool that helps teams to measure and understand how effectively they are working together. And for a team to work effectively together, there are 16 elements that are really important for teamwork. So I'll share with you what these 16 are. So we start off with the red. So there's accountability at the top, an understanding of who is accountable for doing what in your team. Then we have decision making. Who has the authority to make decisions? Who's got the authority to spend the budget in terms of what you do on your team? Then we have purpose. What does your team exist to do? What's your project team exist to achieve? And then vision. What is your vision for the future? What does your team want to aspire to achieve? So those 4 are what I call strategic actions. And then the next 4, the blue, is planning at the top right. So do you have plans, project plans in your team that you use on a regular basis, you refer to? Do you have processes to make sure that your project is delivered effectively? So written processes that other people can understand. Do you and your team reflect and actually say, stop, let's reflect on what we've done in our project. Are there any things we need to change moving forward? And roles and skills we've covered. You know, do we understand the role that each person in our project team undertakes and also the skills that they have? So this is what I call framework mapping. They're all maps to help you and your team move forward effectively. The next 4 are the yellow. So we've got collaboration. Do your team share knowledge between each other? Do you collaborate effectively? Do you communicate well? So do you have plans in place for team communication, especially at this moment in time where some of you may be working remotely from your team? How good is that communication? Do you have a positive working environment? So whether you're working remotely or in the office, do you have a positive working environment? Or do you just keep your heads down and keep trying to deliver against your objectives? So there's no fun, there's no excitement, there's no motivation. And transformation. Do you enable team members to come up with ideas to make things better? So these are what I call creative interactions. Then we have the 4, last but not least, green elements. So at the top of the top left, how good is trust within your team? Is there commitment? So are team members committed to achieving? Do they help each other out? Or do members of the team walk out at 5 o'clock in the evening, even when one of their colleagues is struggling, and they don't ask them if there's any help they can offer? Do people value and appreciate diversity? Diversity in who you are, your beliefs, your background, your values, and your behavioral skills? And how good are your team meetings? Do your team meetings start and end on time? Do they come up with actions that people are held accountable for? So the green elements are what I call coactive connections. And these can be measured. Here's an example on the screen. This is a team that has used this model to measure their team effectiveness. And this is the element that's called team meetings. And each team member anonymously answers 3 questions. So because there's 16 elements, there are a total of 48 questions that each team member answers. And these anonymous question responses create a team dynamics report. And this is the example of a team dynamics report relating to team meetings. And as we can see, because there are 48 questions in total, this one here is the lowest ranked. So the team are saying that the team meetings do not start or end on time. So that is causing them an issue. So by understanding this data, this information, the team can actually start talking about what is going wrong with their team meetings, why do they not start or end on time, and come up with some ideas that are practical, that the team agree that they can implement and change to make things better in the future. With this team, the reason why their meetings started and did not start and end on time was because people were booking in back-to-back meetings. So if one of their meetings overran, it had a knock-on effect on the next meetings. So there was a lot of wasted time. So this team agreed that in future, they would have a 15-minute window of time where they would not book back-to-back team meetings. And suddenly, everybody in the team turned up at the right time. Their meetings ended on time. And because they had this 15-minute buffer, it meant that they weren't late for their next meeting. So there were some simple things that this highlighted they weren't doing right, but that they were able to change. So what do you get in the Team Dynamics report? I'm just going to show you the pages that you get. So you have a summary page, which shows some information, and then a second page. So on the first page, it shows your effectiveness. So this team, as an example, are only 56% effective. It shows here then the things that they're good at. So this team was saying that their processes were good, they had a good working environment, they were accountable for different parts of the project that they were delivering, but it also highlighted their challenges. So they weren't very good at collaboration, sharing their knowledge experience. They weren't good at reflecting. The team never stopped to say what's working well, what's not working well. So they had some strengths, but they also had some challenges. The report then also enabled them to just check whether there was a balance between those elements, the blue and red elements that are task orientated, against the yellow and green, which are relationship orientated. So they were able to check that out. Sitting underneath those 2 pages are the granular details. And we're not going to have a look at these into detail, but I just thought I'd share with you what this information looks like. So we have all 48 questions. These are the questions that relate to the framework mapping and the strategic action. And then equally, there's another 2 pages that relate to the relationship categories, the coactive connections, and the creative interactions. So lots of data, lots of information that's really useful for the team. And going back to the first page, because we can measure team effectiveness, you can then understand whether your team is a high-performing team, whether it's an average performing team, or whether it's a developing team. And in this example, as we can see, the team effectiveness was 56%, so it was a developing team. There were a few issues that they needed to address. And it can get you into some great discussion in terms of what's working well and what's not working well. This is an example of a team that I was working with recently, and they highlighted on their team dynamics report that decision-making was a problem with them. Decision-making was a big problem. So this is where their discussions started in the team. It started off with a discussion around decision-making. That actually led them to talking about the fact that decisions that were agreed were then dismissed because they didn't have a clear vision of what they needed to achieve. That meant that they didn't hold each other accountable. They didn't hold each other accountable because they didn't have the right processes in place. And therefore, they didn't discuss this in team meetings. They didn't discuss it in team meetings because they didn't have it planned on their agenda, and they didn't give themselves enough time to reflect. So just by having this data and this information about one thing relating to decision making, got them to discuss a number of different areas where the team weren't performing well. And it then enabled them to actually discuss practical ideas to change how they work together as a team. So really important not only to understand who is in your team, so the technical and the behavioral aspects, but also to know how effectively your team are working. So finally, what are the hints and tips that I'd like to share with you that you can apply immediately? Well, I've gathered lots of data about teams and how they've been working. This is the big data from 2019. And I'm going to share 2 hints and tips from the 4 things that teams struggle with. So the 4 things that teams struggle with: purpose, reflection, team meetings, and processes. I'm just going to share with you some tips for purpose and team meetings. So team purpose is the most important thing that you need to get right when you're working in your teams. You need people to understand what your team exists to do, what this enables, and the benefits that this delivers. In the research I've undertaken, 4 out of 10 team members say that their team purpose and team objectives are not known. That is frightening. If you think, if you're in a team of 10, it's likely that 4 of your team don't know what your team is trying to achieve. So here's my tip. Something to try out when you get back into your teams. A team purpose statement consists of 3 elements, and this is an example of a team that I worked with recently. Their team purpose was to produce monthly accounts that are as accurate as possible as quickly after the month end. Not very inspiring, not very motivational, and people in the rest of the organization called these people, it was a finance team, they called them the bean counters. Not a very nice name to call them. They called them the bean counters. So morale and esteem within the team was very low, and other parts of the organization had a poor view of that team. So I worked with them to create a new team purpose statement. The 3 elements I got them to work on is, what did the team exist to do? What did that enable, and what were the benefits? So this is what they came up with. The finance team exists to ensure the timely delivery of value-adding financial data and information to our global business units, which enables them to make informed investment decisions that result in tangible benefits to our customers, staff, and organization. A lot better than what they had originally. And this is what you can do in your project team. Go back into your teams and get your team to discuss, what do we do, what do we enable, and what are the benefits. Very simple. You can probably create this within 1 hour. The rules, it's got to be motivational. It should be something that inspires you and connects with you in your heart. You should be able to tell somebody else in 1 minute what your team exists to do. You shouldn't use jargon. Don't use 3-letter acronyms. So don't use things like KPI, anything like that. No jargon, because somebody outside your team should understand it. So my first tip to you, make sure that you have a strong motivational team purpose statement that everybody in your team understands. Second thing, team meetings. We all go to lots and lots of team meetings, and as we can see in the image there, lots of our team meetings are absolutely boring. Frighteningly, 1 in 3 people say their team meetings are ineffective. So again, if you've got a team of, say, 10 people, there's going to be at least 3 people there thinking that your team meeting is not working for them. 38% of team members said they don't receive information to prepare for their team meetings. Again, really important that the agenda and relevant information is sent out beforehand. Now, we haven't got time to for me to share all the tips on how to make your team meetings work. However, if any of you have got a smartphone, if you go onto your camera and you scan the QR code, it should open up a web browser which will take you to the article about team meetings and making them work for everyone on my website. Don't worry if you haven't got a smartphone. When you get the slides, I'll send the slides through to Tony, who can distribute them. You will see at the bottom of this slide, I've got the HTML code so that you can go to the website and you can read that for free and utilize these top tips that are there. So last but not least, finally, because we're nearly up to we started a little bit later, but I've tried to speed things up to get through it because I know it's your evening. So the key learning points from this this session. Number 1 is know who is in your team. 2 elements to that, technically and behaviorally. And for those of you that aren't using behavioral profiling, I would suggest you inquire with your HR departments how to get your team profiled. And secondly, if you are not measuring your teamwork, your team effectiveness, you might want to consider doing that as well, because those two, knowing who is in your team and how effective your teamwork is what drives success. So we've covered these 4 objectives, hopefully to your satisfaction. For those of you who want to give me some feedback or want to ask for any information about the webinar, scan this QR code. If you haven't got your smartphone, you can always drop me an email. The email's at the bottom of the page. As I mentioned, the relevant learning slides I will get to Tony so that he can make sure that they are shared with all of you who've joined this webinar. So all that remains for me, and this is where you can unmute your microphones. The last thing that remains for me is to say thank you for sharing the webinar with you. I hope you found it of value and of use. And if you have any questions, please, now is the time to ask me.
Hello, thank you, Nick, for your session. I think we have 3 questions from the chat box.
Okay. So, okay, here we go. So I see a resemblance in the 4-color personality type you are presenting with MBTI. Would you say encouraging team members to take MBTI tests could be the key to better performing teams? Yes, MBTI is based on the psychology of Carl Jung. It was produced in America by a mother and daughter, Isabella Myers and Catherine Briggs. They added a 4th dimension. So Carl Jung used introversion, extroversion, thinking and feeling. He used a 3rd called sensing and intuition. And the 4th that appears in the MBTI is judging and perceiving, J&P. It's a good tool. It's a good behavioral tool. So whatever tool that you want to use, great, use it. MBTI doesn't use colors. So sometimes people struggle with the descriptors, the initials. Am I an INTJ? Am I a EFTP? Whereas the color models, people go, I'm red, yellow, green, blue. I'm, blue, green, red, yellow, whatever it is. But whatever you use, I'd encourage you to use behavioral profiling. Arisman, how to manage big teams effectively. Big teams probably have more challenges than smaller teams. When I've led teams myself, I've always kept my teams to a maximum of 16 people. If I wanted to be really effective, I used to keep my teams to 12. And I used to have 4 direct reports, because what that means is you can work with them on a calendar basis. Having 4 direct reports meant that I could see each one of them on a weekly basis for a debrief about how their team, their sub-team was doing. So I think it's probably even more challenging for big teams. And if you've got a very big team, I would suggest you need to think about breaking it down into sub-teams so that you have sub-managers sitting underneath that. So I hope that answers that question satisfactorily. With the current global slowdown due to COVID, could this approach 4 colors be applied in for organizations resizing exercise without affecting team performance? I would say that it's even more important now. If teams are changing shape and downsizing and resizing, you're still going to have teams. And therefore, it's really important that those teams know each other from the behavioral profiling and their technical skills, and also how effectively they're performing in terms of team effectiveness. So I've got a lot of teams that I'm working with who are working remotely, and we've been doing the training online. We've been doing it virtually via Zoom, because they've identified that the need is probably greater now than ever before for effective teamwork. So again, I hope that covers that one. How to minimize conflict in a team from Karina. One of the simplest ways is, and again, it links into profiling, is getting people to share about each other. Find out what a person's drivers are, what they're inspired by, what they're motivated by, what their communication needs are, how do they make decisions. So for me, conflict is about building trust within a team, and the best way to build trust within a team is what I call appreciative trust. It's finding out about the whole person. So we have what I call organizational trust, which is, trusting people that they don't steal the laptop, trusting people that they do the hours that they agree to work. Appreciative trust is much deeper, and it's finding out and appreciating the whole person. So I think that's probably the best way to minimize conflict, is finding out more about team members. How to empower a team and boost team performance during a pandemic when resource optimization is going on. As I've said, that's from Philander Bond. Really, it's about those two elements. It's about having the data available to understand who's in your team and how effectively your team are working together. Because if you haven't got data, if you haven't got information, you don't know whether things are working well or whether things are working badly. How to deal with a corrupt team getting bribes from contractor to smooth progress and ignore work procedures. That is a tricky one. However, I would imagine if you are working for an organization, there are going to be some legal frameworks that would say that that team member who is getting bribes should be sacked or disciplined. So if it was me and I knew that there was a corrupt team or members of the team were taking bribes, I would immediately go to my legal department or my HR department with the evidence. I think the key thing is you must have evidence. So facts, figures and information, present it to HR or to the legal team and then let them sort it out. How to change the bad culture within a team into a better positive culture. Again, it's about talking, it's about being open, it's about being honest. Quite simply, one of the things I would do is get individuals, and if they didn't feel comfortable, get individuals to write on post-it notes what are the things that aren't working in their team. So by writing on a post-it note, they could do it individually, and then you could get them to put the post-it notes onto a flipboard, and then you could start to discuss them. So what it means is that an individual is not saying it specifically, they've just written it down, and then the whole team share and discuss it. So I think, yeah, better positive culture, it's all about talking to each other, talking through what are the issues, and if something is an issue, what are we going to do about it as a team? Okay, I think that's all the questions that have come through in the chat box, Tony.
Yes, I think, is anyone have further questions? We have discussed all the one in the chat box. If you have any, feel free to unmute your mic and speak up. So no more questions.
What are the
We have one.
prerequisite?
Oh yes, please.
What are the prerequisite condition before using the tools on mapping the people's skills and behaviours? The only prerequisite condition is that everyone in your team agrees to do something like that. I've never known a team member say no, they don't want to do it. You know, I don't think there needs to be a prerequisite. Just this is what we're going to do in our team. Does anybody have any issues? If everybody says no, then go ahead and use it. Most team members and teams see these things in a positive light. They are there to help and support people rather than anything that's bad. Okay.
So, okay, anyone? We have one more question if anyone
one more.
Still want to ask.
There's nothing in the chat box. Oh, one more.
No, it's thank you, not only.
Oh, it's right. Okay.
So if there is no one asking questions, I think this is the end for our session. Thank you, Nick, for sharing with us. This
Pleasure.
really our pleasure to have you here with us tonight. It's afternoon from your side, right? So hopefully then we can engage in another session. Before we end up the session, I would like to ask all of you to turn on your video to have pictures together. So usually we'll have a photo, right? But since this is online, so we'll have our virtual pictures.
Thank you so much, Nick.
So,
pleasure. Thank you.
Nick, can you
nice sharing, Nick.
Stop sharing, Nick, before so we can
Mr. Nick.
pictures. Nick, do you mind to stop sharing the screen so we can have?
Oh yeah, I will do. Yeah. There we go.
So while waiting, we will ask you to turn on your video. I would like to inform you that the polling the mistake from the polling is from my side. Actually, it's not from Nick. I supposedly to create the polling one by one, but I mistakenly to create all in one, the question in one polling. Sorry, Nick, about that.
Okay.
So please turn on your video so we can have a pictures together. Okay. So I'll just count. We have three pages here. So be patient. We have a lot of participants for today. 1, 2, 3. The second page. 1, 2, 3. One more. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so don't forget to fill in the form that being distributed in the chat box, so you guys can have the material, the pictures, and the recording. I still have the cards here mixed with me.
Fantastic.
Thank
Great.
you, Nick. Thank you, Tony.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Nick. Thank you for your time.
Nick, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Don't forget to join our next event on 22nd August. Okay?
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Pak Tony.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you all committee.
Have a nice day,
Thank you
guys.
all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Nick. Thank
Okay,
you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you. Thank you. So you have another session, Nick, after this?
No, I've not got a session now this afternoon. I'm going to write some more of my book.
Okay.
Yes.
Great.
Because my publisher will she keeps chasing me and saying, "How many pages have you written?" But I'm pleased to know. I've just looked out my window and it's just rained for the first time in 3 weeks.
Okay.
So we've got some rain, which is great. Wonderful. Well, I'll send through a PDF copy of it to you.
Yes. Thank you. So really appreciate your time. So hopefully we will engage more in the next session. Hopefully also some time next year we can meet in personal.
That'll be fantastic. That'll be great.
Great.
But we'll keep in touch.
Yes. Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Nick.
Hariman yang isi udah berapa Hariman?
48.
Cuma 48 yang isi?
Ya.
Oke. Apa kabar Mas Arif? Sehat? Luar biasa.
Mantap, gue suka sama panel co-hostnya nih, backgroundnya cakep. Backgroundnya yang cakep.
Belakangnya yang cakep ya, orangnya mah enggak.